We're what?
You ready? Okay. We need to start.
Okay. The March 1st, 2021 meeting of the City Planning Commission is called to order. Could we have the roll call, please?
Scott Gold,
Here.
Jordan Jamieson. Here. Aaron Peterson,
Here.
Justin Rodriguez,
Present.
and Jack Williams.
Here.
Thank you, all present.
Let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Would you lead us, Aaron?
Sure. Put your right hand over your heart, repeat with me. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. So do we have any public comment on items that are not on the agenda?
We do not have any public here other than one of our applicants with us.
Anybody online?
And we don't have, well, we have our city attorney, who is Chelsea Solvang, with us today. She will be the planning commission city attorney. She works with Dave Fleischman. Then we have Jim Thomas with us, if he would like to make a comment from the city council. If anybody would like to make a comment, please speak now. Otherwise, we have no public comment.
Ms. Bradford, if I can just say hello to everyone. It's a pleasure to be working with you all.
Okay, well, welcome.
Thank you.
No comment, just watching.
Okay, requests for continuance, withdrawals, addition of ex-agenda items? Nothing? How about conflicts and ex parte communications? No? How about the approval of minutes for February 1? Has everybody read them? Do you have any changes or?
I don't have any changes. If everybody's good, I'll make the motion.
Okay.
I'll second it.
Okay. Oh,
Everybody in favor, say aye.
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 Passes 5-0.
I vote. Okay. Moving on to hearing items, item A. Lori, would you bring us up to date, please?
Yes. Good evening. My name is Lori Tamura, contract planner, and presenting the Waterwheel building plan development plan before the Planning Commission. This is a renovation of the existing building to reestablish commercial and residential uses, granted modification of the parking requirements, and recommend waiver of parking fees to the City Council. As you may well be aware, this particular project has been vacant for a number of years. Prior to that, an application was submitted for a hotel project, the Solvang Hotel, that did get approved and moved into the construction plans, and then the project stopped. And before that, it was a restaurant, retail spaces throughout the building. And it's been around since about 1979. It was approved when it was with the County of Santa Barbara. And we have a new applicant that has purchased the building and is planning to move forward with renovations and restoring it back to a restaurant, retail, and some office spaces on the third floor. So and as noted in the staff report, there are just two items that are really of issue here. One of them is parking. So I'd like to go through the slides. This is the aerial photograph of the property and on that particular block. And so you have Solvang Theater Fest on the other side of OB Alley. And then you have a number of smaller buildings and office, other uses along the alleyway. And then, of course, you have the main building. The current parking on the site is 15 spaces that are striped, but it's under-designed, and there's some opportunities here. So I'd like to go to the next slide just so we can look at some architecture first. This is the proposed plan for the building to be repainted and renovated, and we can just keep going. the courtyard area. At one time, there was a little pond in there, and you could play with boats and things, and that'll all be restored into just a courtyard area. Again, here's the front of the building that you see at the corner of Molly and First Street.
This is what it is now.
This is, nothing is changing on the property, but this is the repainting
That's the new paint.
plan.
New paint job.
And this is what they're proposing as their architectural renovation, is the restoring and repainting the building.
Okay.
Okay? So the parking issue. The previous parking layout had 15 spaces. As you can see, there is a combination of spaces along their southern property line. And then there was these 4 kind of odd spaces in the back off of the alleyway that kind of had to swing in to pick up those spaces. And that's how it existed for many, many, many years. There's a shed right in the middle of it, or a storage unit. And so if we go to the next slide. This was the layout of their parking for the hotel. And they were able to get up to about 24 spaces. And they used compact spaces for some of the additional spaces, but they also provided some additional parallel parking along the side of the building. And then they still had the 4 kind of strange spaces in the back. The driveway is plenty wide enough to have additional parking up against the building, and maneuverability is still there, but this is what was proposed for the hotel project. Go to the next one. Again, we're still challenged with parking, so how do you make it more efficient? And so one of the ways to get more spaces and still have a good maneuverability was a proposal to take access for those parking spaces along the back directly off of the alleyway. And so that captured another 5 or 6 spaces back there that were much more accessible and able to avoid some of the maneuverability issues coming off of that alleyway to those 4 parking spaces. Now you have 8. And so the proposal, the recommendation before you today is to recognize the parking that is currently being designed in this proposal as taking access directly off of the alley. That is a modification that's being recommended. And so that's the first issue. The second issue, and if we could go to the next slide. This is the first floor area, if we can go to the second one. And second floor area, and then the third floor. Is there another slide?
That's all.
Oh, okay, go back to the second one, sorry. Okay, this is actually, I'm sorry, the slides got switched. This is the third floor. And it's being proposed as office space with their own individual bathrooms. And usually office space is normally during 8 to 5. The restaurant and some of the other activities would be later in the evening, particularly with the Solvang Theater Fest right next door. And so you can make a recommendation or a decision that there could be a reciprocal parking arrangement or mixed-use parking arrangement where you would recognize that the 15 spaces for the office space would be offset in the evenings with the restaurant use. And so that is a recommendation from staff, is to allow that recognition of mixed use on this property. So that's the second modification for this property. The third modification, or the third item, would be a recommendation to the city council for a waiver of parking fees. If you use the calculations that are in the staff report, and the highest number of parking spaces would be 57 parking spaces. And you subtract the 15 that are the reciprocal, you're down to 42. And they providing 24 on site, that leaves you with 16 spaces that they would need to request to the city council a waiver of parking fees.
Lori just said, I think it's 18 spaces, not 16, because it's 42, not 40.
Oh, you know what? Thank you, sir. The math, yeah. We would be, the planning commission can make a recommendation to the city council how they feel about the waiver of parking fees. So those are the three items that are tied to how to move this property forward and still respect what's in the city ordinance, and then make the final request to the city council for the waiver of the parking fees. The applicant is, and then the last item is that there's a discussion in the staff report about the colors that you saw. The applicant, when they purchased the property, came to the city in October to say they'd like to start moving forward with painting the building. The city staff at that point, because we were between Board of Architecture Review and the branding committee, we gave them approval to paint the building. They decided not to move forward with that until they got through the development plan process. So we're recommending that, the colors they look nice, but we are going to send them forward to the design review committee for final approval now that we have this process in place. So they will probably be scheduled to the April or the May meeting for final approval of the proposed painting.
I'm sorry, when is that? What meeting was that?
In April or May,
April or May? Thank you.
yes. March, I think the next meeting is March 11th, is their first design review committee meeting. So staff is here tonight to recommend approval of the project with the modifications that we outlined, and we're here to answer any questions that you may have.
The parking on the alley, we're assuming that it had 4, it didn't have 7 or 8 or 10, or?
If you look,
Because if you look at the striping, is it, I've been there, it's hard to tell, it's been striped over, it's been 40 years or something.
I went back through the previous plans and site plans, and they all showed the 4 kind of coming off the alleyway and moving in, like the first exhibit showed.
Interesting.
And so I didn't see any exhibit that showed existing layout with parking coming straight off of the alleyway.
Okay, thank you. Other question, the shed, permit on the shed, did we look into that at all? I'm curious about that.
I looked at some old aerial photographs, and it's been there for about 20 years.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question, Larry. That corner going down Oddby from the alley behind the sausage garden right there, it's pretty challenging. I have a Ford pickup truck, and even making that turn with the bollard posts and there's a fire hydrant right there in that corner. And it looks like there's a trash enclosure, and you're gonna have the stalls. Have you had Matt look at that, Matt Vanderlyn, to make sure that we have the right dimensions? Because it is pretty tight in there. And then especially on a busy weekend, cars pulling in and out with riding their Surrey bikes and stuff, I'm just worried about being a kind of a hazardous condition.
Matt, the city engineer, public works director, did look at this configuration and thought it was actually much safer than the previous layout because of the backwards movement that you'd have to make to get out of those 4 parking spaces. Going directly back, you're looking both ways, and there was enough movement there. Also, because of Solvang Theater Fest, most of their activities in the evenings or in the afternoons, on weekends, that you don't have that conflict for the day-to-day stuff. So he felt comfortable with this alternative proposal.
Has there been an update with the health department or fire code since this was operational the last time versus opening up a new restaurant today?
They have to meet all of current code requirements, and they have been working with the building department and getting the information that they need, the applicants here to respond to any questions that you might have. But yes, they will still need to update the building.
Thank you.
On the restaurant, if I read it correctly, they're not actually putting in a restaurant or doing any upgrades to the restaurant as part of this plan, is that correct?
The main restaurant, which is the Caddy Corner building, that is proposed to be a restaurant
Yes.
in this. And
With some dining outside.
yes, with dining and patio areas outside.
But it says improvements are left to a featured tenant.
Well, that's usually what they do with a restaurant, isn't it?
Yeah. Right,
So the restaurant, whoever goes in there is gonna have to upgrade the kitchen and, all that.
Correct.
That's not part of this project. That was really my question.
I think it's how the applicant is intending it to be a restaurant, whether they do it or someone that they lease to do it. That's up to them.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Should turn this on. If not, we can open up to public comment.
Are we going to hear from the applicant?
You want to do that before or after?
It's up to you if you would like the applicant to present now.
Well, he's here, let's let him present, yeah.
My name is Maz. I'm with Jameson's Elias Holding. We bought the building in May of last year. So since then, we've looked at many different possibilities. Doing a hotel is not realistic. The retro engineering that needs to be done is just astronomical. It just would never make sense. So the only thing we could propose is to go back to what it originally was used for, identical, nothing more, nothing less. Obviously, as you'd asked, we have to upgrade whatever it is to come to code. There is some grandfather stuff that we're going to take advantage of, obviously, and some other stuff to make it economical. I was talking to Lori about it. Obviously, Solvang is a great city. It's a tourist city, but it's not, we're not going to get $7 a foot. So it has to be something that's going to make financial sense. So it's not that we don't want to pay the city of Solvang, whatever the fees are for parking, or not want to build turn it into a hotel. I mean, I'd love to turn it into a hotel. You guys have the most hotels per capita. So it'd be a genius idea, but, we went through the numbers with our engineers and we went through the numbers with our architect. It just literally every stud, every bolt, everything has to be upgraded. It's cheaper to knock it down at that point. And I think no insult to the previous guy, but if he would have known better, he would have knocked it down just to build a new one. So it's too tedious to do that. So that's why we're keeping it the same. I don't know if there's any questions that come to mind that I can answer for you guys.
I welcome the renovation, going back to pretty much what was there, because the
No
retail
museum.
space, I think, is useful, so.
Pardon me?
I go, no museum.
So, yeah. No, I think it's nice to see the building getting renovated, because it's been sitting there for so long, so.
Yeah, we think it's a beautiful building.
Yeah.
We actually, believe it or not, we didn't pick the colors. We paid someone to do it, to study it and see what would bring vibration to the location, because it's been empty for so long. We believe that the upstairs will be able to possibly rent it to some of these vineyards that want to have, bring up their clients. Me and my business partner, we're in the restaurant business. We have quite a few, and, we get entertained as much as, we would like, but we're not into it. But I know there's a lot of, businesses that buy wine, and we're hoping we could make these little pods of 500 square feet where they could just, hey, come up, let us show you our new wines coming out, blah, blah, blah. So kind of bring energy to the building and to the area, we're hoping. And we do have a hotel down the street, the theater in the back. So I'm hoping to have a lot of synergy there.
Yeah, I like the fact that they have that sunken walkway and it's gonna remain. I think it gives character to the city, having spaces like that. So that's what I'm pretty, I'm excited about the fact that it's gonna stay the same.
Thank you.
Because I remember when I was little, doing the RC boats, coming up here and playing RC
Yeah.
boats, so.
Bring the boats back.
You know, at $1 a play, it might be a little tough, but it's funny you guys mentioned that because my business partner is the one that actually remembers that location. Him and his family used to come down and play with the thing. So, you know, he has a lot of sentimental value to the building. But, you know, unfortunately, in today's world, everything is a liability. Having a pond, that's a lot easier to have a little area for a fire pit and people gathering and eating and being able to use it more that way. The other thing is that we're hoping with time, you know, if we do get the right tenant in there as a restaurant, they could bring a little bit of live music, you know, obviously not until 2 in the morning, but, you know, casual light music between, let's say, like 4 to 8 or something like that to, again, bring vibration to the building, so.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Now we can go to public comment.
Yes. If anybody online, we don't have anybody in person. If anybody online would like to make a public comment on this item, please raise your hand on Zoom or unmute yourself. Raise your hand or unmute yourself. Seeing no public comment.
No public comments. We'll bring it back to the commission for discussion. Anybody want to?
Take a shot. I'm kind of going at it a different way than staff did. I look at it and say 1979, we have to assume that it was approved and it was okay. We have to assume that the additional patio, which was done, had to be okayed by the city. To me, it's the same use. I don't think they owe the city 1 parking spot. I mean, maybe I'm in minority, but you have a building and it's permitted and it meets exactly what the use was originally. They got a permit to add on. Why would we ask them to meet current code on parking? If we did that for every remodel, not change of use, but every remodel, we couldn't survive. I mean, we just couldn't survive. Every building in town would have to have 10 parking spots with in lieu fees waived. I'm absolutely against waiving in lieu fees. I would never vote to recommend to the city council to ever waive in lieu fees. If there's an in lieu fee that is necessary to be paid, they need to pay it. I hate the word conjunctive use. I think that is a misnomer, and you can just do a shell game with, oh, well, we're going to have, with all due respect, we've done it before with, it's a restaurant. They're going to stay in the hotel, then they're going to eat there, and 25%, or is it 22%, or is it 42% are going to eat there, and who's going to be there? And the offices will close on the weekends, and doesn't matter. I go off of 1979, it's permitted use. They've got their parking in there. They have 4 on the alley. I applaud that they want to add more to the building because I think that's a great thing. I do not have a problem with you backing into an alley. We have it backed into all over the city into alleys. I don't have a problem with it. I do have a little issue with the corner. I agree it's a little tight. But that's a design issue. Now, having said that I think it's all okay. I applaud that you want to add 900 square feet of patio or 700 or whatever it is. Now he's short parking. Now he's short parking because it's 900 square feet of, let's say, patio, which is great with fire pits. He owes us 3 parking spots. He's got to pay it. Doesn't have to. He's got 4 in the alley. He can put in 10. He's plus parking. So I don't think that that's an issue. I would like to see that shed, which does not have a footing. I walked it. It has parking stripes underneath it. It's on a 0 lot line. There's no way it's permitted to come down. They don't need the shed. They'd like to have the shed. They don't need it. They've got plenty of space to do it because you can get 2 more parking spots in that parking lot with the shed gone. You can get another parking spot across the way like they did the 3. You can get 1 more. So you can get the plus 3. I mean, you can get that number up to where it works. I'd like to see the alley not have 10, I'd like to see the alley have 7. They had 4, you get to 7, you back a couple off of that corner, make them a little bigger. They had 4, you're gonna get to 7, there's your 3 for your patio, you've got everything else you need on your parking lot. You've added handicap parking, which it doesn't have, so you've lost one there, you take down the shed, you add 2, you do one across. I think, to me, I just think we would waive that you can back into an alley and not even go to the city with conjunctive use and not go to the city with waiving fees. I hate to go down that road of us determining who we waive fees for and who we don't, and what conjunctive use is. That is a really difficult subjective thing to do, and it's not needed in this case. He can do the restaurant, he can do his add-on, and it's great. And if the restaurant comes in a year or 2 or 3 or whenever, it's super, and it's a great layout. It's a great building. So I'm with you, Justin. It's great. I applaud it. I just don't think he needs what we think he needs, because he's simply meeting what the original design and what was all permitted for, other than the shed, reduce the parking on the alley, add those 3 in the parking lot, and I'm good. So those are my comments. I'm a very legal lawyer guy. You just go, we assume you're innocent until proven guilty. It's not all good. You just go through it. You go through and you do the things, and there's nothing subjective about it. The other gentlemen, when they came in with the hotel and the restaurants, holy criminy, they were waiving in lieu and valet parking, and what time with the theater fest, and at night, it was an absolute mess. This is straightforward and simple.
If I may comment on that, regarding the corner, I have a truck that has a radius of almost 0. So I'd have a nightmare getting in and out of an alley. But, it's not a big deal. We could always move that shed over. Destroying that shed, I could care less. We're very simple-minded people. We're not looking for friction. We're looking to resolve things. So taking down that shed, maybe making the shed in the corner, moving it over, making it a little bit wider so we have a couple more trash cans instead of, then gives you the radius. These are fixable. As long as you guys are happy with us, we're happy to do whatever we can to make you guys happy. So I think like you, but I can't say that as an applicant. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Anybody else? I agree totally. In fact, I think Aaron must have read my notes, because I was going to say essentially the same thing. I don't really believe in waiving in lieu of fees. I think it's a bad idea. And I actually hit on the same idea he did, that this has been approved. It's been there since 1979. I don't think they owe any in lieu fees that we have to waive, especially if they're going to add 9 spaces to what's already there. I think we're good to go.
I'm in agreement with both of them, and really, I appreciate the fact that that old building is going to be brought back to life, and forgive the expression, that sleepy kind of corner will have some life to it now, and so I thank you for bringing that back, and wish you all the best with that.
I agree with all the gentlemen. At first I thought, oh, are they going to have enough parking? Then I calculated in my head. And even when this building, this complex was first built and very robust, we would all drop our kids off. We would never park there. We would drop our kids off, and they would play with the race cars and they'd play with the boats. And it was a very safe environment for them. And then we'd come and pick them up. The parking lot was mostly empty in those days. So, but you don't have the boats now, and you don't have the cars, so we're not going to just be dropping them off anymore.
I
Okay?
think they're adults now. So
Yeah, they are
bring it
adults.
for drinking.
But they have children who would love to have had that experience. But I wish you well. I think it's a nice project. I agree with the tightness of the where the 2 alleyways intersect. Maybe you get rid of that. Is that the trash enclosure?
It is. We can move it over.
Maybe you can move it over
We
to
can move it
the,
over, absolutely. It's not a big deal.
yeah.
And even if you lost 1 or 2 spots there, makes the
If you-
backing out easier into
Yeah,
that alley, and
absolutely.
you've got the parking. I
Absolutely.
just keep saying, as a condition, you add square footage to that patio. If it's not, you can, 3 spots buys you 900 square feet. I
Yeah.
measured it kind of, you're
Yeah.
better at it, maybe you need 4, but then you might have to write a check for 12 grand. So, you just kind of work within that.
Yeah.
That's how I look at it.
Okay. Somebody like to make a motion to approve the development plan?
gotta get to that motion now, don't we?
Commissioners, if I may just interject momentarily. First, for an order of operations, the CEQA document should be addressed first, and then the resolution. And as far as the parking requirements, the current requirements have to be applied now, even though we're recognizing that it's consistent with the prior use. They are still obligated to meet current requirements at this time. So what staff has presented is the solution for parking under the current requirements.
Can I ask a question? So you're saying that because you do a remodel on a building, not a change of use, that you must meet the current parking requirements today or get a waiver from city council?
So it's the requirements in place at the time of application.
For a remodel, not a change of use. If I have a restaurant and I remodel my restaurant, I need to then meet the current parking requirement. It was a restaurant, I just moved interior walls and painted. I'd have to meet the current parking requirements?
I think part of what's different here is it was out of use for so long, and this really is a new, they're bringing it back. The building's still there, but they are required to meet the current parking requirements.
And I'm not arguing, I'm just saying I don't know. It just, so if a building sits, is it 1 year, 2 years, 8 years? And I'm
3
not being
years.
flippant.
It's 3 years in the ordinance.
3 years
that-
of vacancy, and then it's
Vacancy.
considered bringing everything up to code.
Well, it then triggers us to move forward with a development plan in the TRZ zone,
Right?
and that's what's happened here. It's been vacant for 7 years. They're going back, they did do the hotel project process, but they're coming back now to do the restaurant, retail, commercial. We still needed to do this development plan process based on the ordinance. So the analysis that was brought forward to you was, yes, it was built in 79, and we acknowledge that, and we understand that that's county provisions, and they could easily have had a fee reduction or paid an in lieu fee at that time. We don't know.
Sure. Yeah.
But in order to compare this project to today's city ordinance, that was what the analysis brought forward to you. And so the opportunity here is to grant the modification to allow the 24 spaces, or whatever number we work out based on your recommendation. Grant the modification for the alley access for the 7 spaces, that's your recommendation. And then not grant the conjunctive use, because you don't want to establish or reinforce that policy.
Right.
It is in the ordinance, but
But do we then have to do a motion to waive in lieu fees or recommend the in lieu fees waiver?
this still needs to go to the city council.
For the waiver of in lieu?
Yes.
But the motion could include, I am scared to death of in lieu fees, because they get thrown around all the time. We have them, and then we just waive them just on a willy. It needs to, the motion that I would support would have to say, given the fact that it met all code in 1979 when it was built and any additions since, therefore, we recommend waiving any in lieu fees. Not, we're waiving in lieu fees because we like them, because it needs to be done. It's an old building, and it's an eyesore. Let's just give this gentleman credit. That to me doesn't sit well. It needs to be objective in my mind, or I can't support it. And hopefully we can get to that resolution. I just want to make sure that in the record it says that, so that later somebody else doesn't say, he got in lieu fees waived of 22 parking spots, why can't I?
Right.
And now we're at a lawsuit, or we're at a challenge, or we're at a how come me and not them?
May I make a suggestion and question, I guess, to the city attorney or assistant district attorney? Is it possible to reactivate the old occupancy permit? I mean, can we go retroactive and the council can say, hey, look, it's been expired, but we have, I don't know if you do or not, authority to reactivate it. And that way it goes back to what it was, and we could just start moving along, paint it, get it ready, rock and roll.
Chelsea, do you have a response to that?
I can look into it further, but I believe the answer is no, because like Lori said, once it's been out of use for those 3 years and you come back to propose a new use, you have to submit a new development plan.
Just
But the use isn't
Just to add to that, I had a project in Los Angeles that was out of date by literally 5 years. And they were able to, the council was able to reopen it and actually put it back on track and finalize it. So I'm not sure I'm sure you're a lot smarter than me, you know your job better, but I'm pretty sure there's got to be some sort of a gray area that allows council to reopen something. Because I
At this
have
point,
done it.
council, I would just remind the council that public comment has closed and that we are in commission deliberations.
Okay, thank you. So what you're telling us is we can't do what we want to do.
I believe you can do what you want to do based on the recommendations and based on the recommendation to the city council in regards to the waiver, but the city council is the deciding on acknowledging whether the 79 building was appropriately done and we're building off of that, or if they need to acknowledge that the waiver of the fees. That will still be a discussion at the city council.
But we can still make our motion.
Yes, and so on the motions that are a part of the staff report on page 2, it outlines first that you would adopt, page 1 is adopt the environmental exemption, and then adopt the development plan. And based on our discussion here, I would suggest that the modifications be A and B, and you don't adopt C.
Okay, and just let me point out with 18 spaces, the in lieu would be $222,768.
Thank you for that.
I'm sorry, so the first again is the PC, am I reading this right, PC resolution number 21-02? No, that's the development plan. So
Right, so
where-
on
where
the
am I
first page is the CEQA exemption.
First,
Page 1 of the report, page 7 of the packet.
it's 7 of the packet. Under the request.
Recommendation A is to accept the categorical exception attachment B pursuant to section 15.332 of the guidelines
I
for
see it,
implementation
thank
of the
you.
California.
So I will make a motion to accept the categorical exemption under attachment B pursuant to section 15332 of the guidelines for implementation of the California Environmental Quality Act and, Quality Act, period.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Everybody in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Passes 5-0.
Now we go to the development plan.
Correct. And just a reminder, staff recommendation is now to not adopt Part C of recommendation, capital B.
So under adopt, on resolution 21-02 approving development plan, I would like to make a change because part of that is the conditions of approval, correct?
Correct.
And I would like to make a change to the conditions of approval that the shed gets removed.
Okay.
So if, with that in mind, I would, this is where the complication comes in. I move to adopt resolution 2102 approving the development plan subject to the findings and conditions of approval, attachment A, with the addition of that the storage shed in the parking lot be removed. Under B, granting the modification to use the alleyway for 7 of on-site parking spaces. Eliminating C, granting of the conjunctive use. And I would have to do the math on A. Because it says 24, but by moving the 3, does it go to 21?
21.
But we're taking the shed away, which adds 2 and 1 across, so I think it nets out at
I
24.
think it's 24.
So then, section BB, granting of the modification, BA, grant the modification to allow 24 parking spaces, 2 being where the shed's being removed, 1 opposite the shed, and reducing the number of the alley parking from 10 to 7.
And you still end up with a net plus 24,
Correct.
or total 24.
So that's my motion. Did I cover it all? City Attorney,
so.
I hope?
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
All right, everybody in favor, say aye.
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 Okay, passes 5-0.
And I'm going to continue on then, and in regards to the request for waiver of the parking recommendations, is that a resolution, or is that just a recommendation, though?
It's just a recommendation.
That we recommend that the city council waives any additional parking fees that staff has calculated, whatever that number is, with the caveat that the reasoning is that this building built in 1979 met all requirements at that time, and any additions during that time to now, we assume, met the current parking guidelines. That is our reasoning for waiving the parking fees.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Everybody in favor, say aye.
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 Passes 5-0.
Does that make sense?
Nice to have a lawyer on the.
Yeah, right. Nice job, Commissioner Peterson.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Really appreciate your time tonight.
Sure. Thanks for coming.
Okay, moving on to item 2B, General Plan Annual Report.
In your staff report is the general plan annual report for 2020. This is a summary of what has transpired over the last year in regards to our housing inventory and what has been issued for permits and approved. And it also runs through what is happening with our general plan update. It's a summary of what is coming forth. The fact that the city has initiated the contract with the consultants to move the general plan forward is reported in here. Obviously, it's not approved yet, but we're in process to update almost all of the elements of the general plan, as well as other elements that were improved previously. The number of units that were approved this last year, and again, these are reflecting those that have been issued permits. Doesn't mean they have all been built yet. But we had 16 units, 1 single-family home, 11 accessory dwelling units, 5 junior accessory units for a total of 16. And again, just so to refresh your memory, a junior ADU is part of the single-family home. An accessory dwelling unit is a standalone building. In the
And they have a
report-
square footage requirement of each one of
Yes.
those.
There are. So attached to your packet are several tables. And I want to just go over that a little bit with you because it has been a very busy year for the planning department. Again, with the ADUs that we just talked about in the single-family home, we had 3 projects that we've been working on, housing projects. One of them was the Alisal Road project, which had 1 very low deed-restricted unit, along with 10 market rate units, and that was approved in October. We had another development plan that was on Alamo Potato Road. It had 2 very low deed-restricted units and 30 market rate. And we also have in process the Mission Drive Apartments project, which is a total of 59 units with 5 very low deed-restricted units. And so as part of the annual report, all of these projects are reported also, even though we haven't issued permits yet for them for construction. But they are part of the inventory, and that's what's reported to the state, and they'll see our progress towards meeting our housing requirements. If you go to the last table, Table B, it looks like this one. You can see that Solvang has met, based on all of the projects that we're working on, has met their allocation for very low, moderate, and above market, moderate housing types. So it's been a good, basically 7 years of permitting, and you can see how some years we had, 35 units, 68, 24. In 2008, there was only 3 units. 2018, and then we're up to 2020, 119 units total. As part of the general plan update, you understand the RENA numbers will be coming down from the state. It'll start a new chapter in our reporting, a new metric that we'll be measuring against. And right now, it's reported that we'll have to meet an obligation of about 191 units in the different categories.
Can I ask, when we talk that we've met, does that include the Alicel apartments and the one on Alamo Pintada?
Yes,
Because that was part of that rezone, not having to be built, but
Right.
just having been rezoned along with the old Skit Mesa, the Mission.
correct.
So we're estimating with the new census, the new RENA numbers and all the things, 191 additional units will need to be found that we're short. In other words, we will need to rezone other properties to meet that need.
Correct.
We don't know how many will be low income or moderate or very low or market.
Comparing the table that you saw there in this Table B, it's going to be pretty much the same obligations that were assigned the last
The
time.
breakdown.
Yes.
And how do we find 191 units? I'm curious. I know last time we worked pretty hard at it and had to go to property owners. I'm just curious what the process is.
Well, interestingly enough, the state is allowing the accessory dwelling units to be counted.
Right.
So a smaller junior ADU is considered a very low unit without any deed restriction because of it's affordable by design. An accessory dwelling unit up to 1,200 square feet is probably a moderate size unit. So we can allocate the ADUs in the different categories based on their size. They're not deed restricted, but we can at least count them in our inventory. There's a lot of other opportunities out there encouraging, rental apartments in the downtown. When buildings are being renovated, encourage that to happen. And we will have more as the general plan update comes forward.
Isn't the general plan have a lot of mixed use, though, in like infill and everything within the TRC and everything? Aren't they planning to have condos upstairs and apartment buildings so people can live and work within?
The zoning
Commercial zone?
ordinance does allow for housing in the TRC zone, residential units. I didn't see in the housing element where they allocated a particular number, doing an analysis to see how many units could actually fit. And I think that's going to be one of the challenges coming up, is to say, if everyone took an opportunity of, of this use, how many units could we get out of there?
Well, along those lines, if you took 500 homes in the city of Solvang and said, golly, everyone can have an ADU, shoot, we're way over. But it's not practical, but that's all we have to be, is not practical. We just have to allow it. If I'm on a half acre, I can have a 1,200. If someone's on a 7,000, they can have the junior, and we just count those up and go, wow, we met it. I mean, that seems a pretty low threshold to meet. Is it that easy?
Well, it is something to consider. Most jurisdictions are seeing about a 10 to 20% of their current inventory taking advantage
Gotcha.
of ADUs and junior ADUs. It will be a challenge for water and sewer and roads and parking and all of those, if everybody took advantage of that opportunity.
But parking isn't a part of it. They don't
Yeah,
have to.
parking, you're not you don't have to provide parking, and you can even convert a garage.
And it's like, right now, there's no such thing as a single-family dwelling parcel, because you can have a junior, and you can have a full ADU if you have enough property. And SB CAG is saying, yes, count your ADUs and your juniors as part of your RENA numbers.
Well, the state's allowing that too. I mean,
Yeah.
so,
Within a percentage, maybe, or 50% or 40% or 20% can be, or you think all of it, or we don't know? Is it all? We don't know.
I'm sorry, the question was,
Of exactly, back to my question was, then everything's a triplex or a duplex in town, can you count them all? And you had said, well, it seems like maybe about 20% of that could go towards. So if we're short 190, then is it really only 40 of those ADUs can be counted toward it, and we're still short 150? Or is it all the duplex and triplexes?
so as Commissioner Jameson said, the state has rezoned single-family to 3 units. No matter, it could be an R1, it can be all the way up to an acre. Even the multifamily that currently exists, if they have a unused
500 square foot,
500 square foot space, it could be converted to an ADU. So we are getting a couple of those now also to, renovate a particular portion. And so the assumption is that everyone could have these accessory units. What is being experienced in those that have allowed these for a while, remember, it started off as granny flats, then it was second dwelling units, and now we got this.
ADUs.
And those previous ones had to go through a hearing or had to get land use permits
Right.
and notice and everything else. We don't
These
do that
don't.
anymore. We can't do that. And so the assumption that most cities have experienced is about a 10 to 20% of their build out is taking advantage of this. Because remember, you've got to deal with renters now if you're going to have somebody there. The other part of the ordinance or the law is that the main house can be a rental also.
You don't have to
owner
live on the
occupied.
property, right?
So these are all things that we're learning through the process and will be part of the inventory next year when we get the new numbers.
Big change.
So this report will be forwarded to the city council and then filed with the state.
Just one correction, on page 38, in the zoning effect requirements, under accessory dwelling units. Does the planning commission recommended that the state review ADUs per state law, and that
Oh.
the city?
Staff. Thank you. Okay.
And I also think that it doesn't make any difference if you live in a planned development that has CC&Rs that say you cannot have ADUs, that's gone. Yeah.
Correct. Correct.
So all those little cute casitas over in Skip Mesa's.
Thank you.
Moving on to
It's going to be interesting.
general discussions. Any discussion items anybody wants to bring up?
The only thing I'd like to bring up, and it dovetails into what we talked about, about the parking. We had chatted about this, boy, and I couldn't even tell you, 7 years ago, 5 years ago, 3 years ago, and we've talked about it, and we went through some hullabaloo, whatever. We kind of came to a conclusion at one point, the planning commission, maybe it wasn't official, but we need an inventory of our parking. In other words, you go to this gentleman's lot, and it's striped, but the stripes are gone, but how many stripes are there? And then there's a shed over 2 of them, and then how many parking lots does Demarcus Square have? How many parking spaces does a hotel have? Because when people come in for it, we just ought to have an inventory that we know that that piece of property, and have a drop-dead date. I don't care if it's January 1 of '22. That's how many parking is there. When you go through to modify and do it, you have a number that's in a file. Because this gentleman from 1979 could be absolutely lambasted with $300,000 in parking fees, or somebody else could, because we don't assume that they're innocent until proven guilty. We say, prove to us that you had enough parking. It shouldn't be that way. We should have a date that we have, this is the parking you have. If you want to argue with us now. And from then on, if I wanted to add on to a building that has no parking, we must assume it paid the in lieu fees at the time. It was grandfathered in legally. And now you want to add 25,000 square feet, you got to pay, or 300 square feet, you got to pay. And not have that argument every time it comes up, just so that we would know that there was an official file. I don't say it's an easy task, but it's something that ought to happen. You look at all the parking behind Tower Pizza, all the buses were there, the buses there are not there. Well, how many parking spots do those owners have back there? Because if they go in for a modification, it's this trying to reinvent it, and every year we get older and older and the memories fade, and at some point, and a new owner buys it, and he thought that he was and she was, and anyway, suggestion, the parking's always an issue. Now we're talking about eliminating parking in Copenhagen, perhaps permanently, and other places in town. It would be nice to know what we have when we have those discussions.
If I can just quickly comment on that one. We don't have a parking inventory per se in that fashion for every single parcel, but we have completed a parking study for public parking and also some of the opportunity zones that could potentially be a partnership between public-private. So when we talk about the larger parking spaces or parking lots behind the pizza tower, those have been looked at and studied and have been provided to the general plan update consultant for them to take it to the next level in terms of the overall general plan update and addressing parking issues for the next 10 to 20 years.
Well, that property is privately owned, that
Correct.
parking lot. And there's a little plaque in the street that says at any time, passage across this land can be revoked. That's not what it says, but that's the gist of it.
Right.
So we
the par-
can't really count that as always there. They may want to build something back there someday.
So the premise of the parking study was to look at, A, what we have available for our public parking supply, including this question of Copenhagen Drive closure, and then to look at any potential private parking structures or parking lots that are underutilized that could potentially be something that the city could approach the private owner to see if there is an opportunity for
Okay.
partnership.
My only thing is, we have a gentleman here who does asphalt for a living and striping. And so if I hire him in my lot and I go make him 7.5 feet wide, and he goes through, and then I say, well, golly, I've got 38 parking spots. I don't have 22. And I'm arguing that I have that. At some point, I would think, and the city goes, well, that's not a legal parking spot. Well, it's been like that for 20 years, and therefore I'm entitled. I mean, at some point, we ought to have it on private, because those plans are gone. We went from county to city to different folks and different planners, and I would like to know, from our property, and you would like to know, and we'd like to know, when you'd like to know, and staff, when they come in and say this, and you say, you have 3 or 4 or 2. And anyway, it's different than the public. It's the private too, just so
I'd
you
just like
know.
to say that it would never make a 7.5-foot stall, so.
That's the motorcycle.
Right, there you go.
And just one more comment, we are implementing the permitting software. I've been talking about it for a while. This hasn't necessarily been a distinct task of that implementation, but with available resources, that could definitely be a great addition to that project.
And just to reiterate, we did ask for that maybe 5 years ago.
I'm thinking a couple times, and
Yeah.
we get busy,
Right.
But when you say just for commercial property, though, I mean,
Yeah, well, not
Hotels,
houses.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, not private homes.
Yeah, I don't care
And
about
I don't
homes.
think that would be that hard to calculate. I mean, there's not that many parking lots in this town.
Correct, and so, yeah,
The inventory, I mean,
yeah,
do it in a weekend.
yeah, I would think.
Since we're talking about parking, right over here on First Street, next to this new development that we just said, hey, this is a great idea. I think there are 3 houses, and Aaron pointed out that they're TRC zoned. Well and good. However, those people have been having a terrible time lately with people parking in their driveways, parking so that they cannot get out of their driveways, and we need to help them. That's where the one comment about the city cares more about the tourists than they do about the residents. That was one of her beefs. So I don't know what we can do about it, but I'm just going to point it out. I mean, I've been told by three different people about that problem. And I think we need to remedy it. I think we need to help them.
Yeah, we
Because
can,
they do live in those houses, and I know it's commercially zoned, but they live there. Those are their houses.
When,
And
and
their
Tony, your point
residents.
also was, as we eliminate more parking in town, perhaps
Yes.
Copenhagen, different places, it will push it even further on both sides.
Right, right.
What's already happening,
Oh, yeah, definitely. You
even
could,
with COVID.
yes, even with COVID.
That's would be an easy red zone fix.
It could be, it could be.
Yeah.
You know, paint the little aprons or whatever those are called of the driveway.
oh, that definitely helps to have this
Yeah.
information, so thank you for letting us know.
Either that or make it limited parking, 20-minute parking or something, I don't know.
But
I don't
they
know
have
that,
no
I don't know, right, and I
Yeah,
don't
and-
think they would
and
like the
probably, I
sign.
don't know where city attorney's comfort is at this point. We're getting pretty deep into a discussion on something that's not on the agenda.
Agreed. Thank you.
That was just a councilman, a commissioner's comment.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, anybody else? Anything? Lori, any planning staff comments?
The only project that is taking a bulk of our time is scanning all of the public files, land use permits, development plans, track maps. And it's a big project, and so the one issue that we have is we don't have documents in the office right now. They're at the scanning company. So we're asking for patience from those that are looking for their plot plans or for their house plans or whatever, that we're getting them back in tranches, and they will be electronically accessible once we get the computer system set up. So it's a move into the 21st century, and we're working hard to make that happen.
So I assume you're working in parallel on the computer system to
Yes,
Correct.
do this,
yes.
not serial.
No, there's a lot happening behind the scenes.
What are we doing about the, like this project we looked at? It was approved by the county. Sometimes those documents are not available. They've gone away somewhere. What are we doing about old houses, like my old house?
You will be surprised how old the files were that we
Okay.
had scanned. I can't guarantee everything, but when the city of Solvang incorporated, the county gleefully dropped off, I don't know, 50 or 60 boxes of files of Solvang from, the early times to 1985. And those were in the attics, they were in racks of files, and
So they've been found.
most of those development plans, tentative maps have been scanned, and we're getting them logged in. The single-family files, which were also county files at one time, are now at the scanning company. So we sent about 40 boxes of files to them, and it will take them a while to get everything done, but so far, it's going pretty well.
Good. Anything else?
I just have one comment, just to let you know that I have asked the general plan update consultants to be available to you at your next planning commission meeting, just to give you an update on their efforts and bring you into that conversation. So they will have a presentation for you. And then I also plan on working with the city council to discuss the idea of forming a general plan update advisory committee. So that will be coming up.
Great.
For the next planning commission meeting, we will be bringing forward to you some of our challenges at Skip Mesa. So we don't have an actual development project queued up, but we do have a number of items that have come up over particularly the last year, and we'll be bringing those forward so you can see how they're living there.
Okay, we'll look forward to it. Okay, thank you. Meeting's adjourned.
Thank you.
Nice job, everybody.
Done.